Does the camel understand when the rider curses it? Laughter rippled around the table as the billionaire leaned back, swirling his wine. The waitress stood frozen knuckles white around the silver tray. She didn't flinch. She didn't speak. But her eyes shifted just once to the receipt printer humming behind the bar. He didn't notice. He kept talking, in Arabic, about her hands, her life, her worth. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that every word landed perfectly. And somewhere between the appetizer and the check, the balance of power quietly changed hands. The rain in Manhattan wasn't the romantic kind you see in movies. It was cold biting and smelled of wet asphalt and exhaust. Inside the gilded cage, officially known as Lulu on 57th Street, the weather didn't exist. Inside, the air was scented with white tea and sandalwood pumped in through vents hidden behind authentic Renoir paintings. Tess Harrington adjusted her apron in the back hallway, wincing as a sharp pain shot up her left calf. It was a double shift, her third double shift this week. At 26, Tess looked older. Her eyes, a striking shade of grey, were rimmed with the red exhaustion of insomnia. She checked her reflection in the stainless steel of the pass-through fridge. No stray hairs, no smudged makeup. Perfection was the minimum requirement at Lulon Test. Table 4 needs water. Table 7 needs the 82 LU decanted. Move. The voice belonged to Henry, the floor manager. Henry was a small man who wore suits that cost more than Tess's yearly rent in Queens. Yet he always smelled faintly of nervous sweat. "On it, Henry." Tess said, her voice steady. It was the voice she used for the job. Flat, subservient, invisible. She walked onto the floor, balancing a silver tray, with the grace of a dancer, though her legs felt like lead. Lulu was where the masters of the universe came to eat gold leaf and discuss mergers that would lay off thousands of people. Tess knew these people. She knew that Mr. Henderson at Table 3 was cheating on his wife with his paralegal. She knew that the tech mogul at Table 9 was about to be indicted for fraud. She'd heard his hushed phone call in the hallway, but to them, she was a ghost. A pair of hands that delivered Wagyu beef and vanished. Tonight, however, the atmosphere was different. There was a buzz in the air, a vibration that rattled even the stoic Hree. The VIP room. Henry hissed, grabbing Tess by the arm as she passed the station. "It's booked tonight, the Al-Saded entourage." Tess felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Karim Al-Saded. The prince himself, Hree whispered, wiping his forehead with a silk handkerchief. "He's in town for the Sovereign Tech acquisition. He's closing the deal with Omnicorp tomorrow. He's celebrating early. I need my best server, not the prettiest Tess, the most competent." "That's you." Tess nodded. She knew the name. Everyone who read the Financial Times knew the name. Karim Al-Sayed wasn't just rich. He was royalty. A man who moved markets with a tweet. He was known for two things: his brilliant, ruthless business acumen and his utter contempt for anyone who wasn't in his tax bracket. "I'll handle it," Tess said. "Good." And Henry's eyes narrowed. "Don't speak unless spoken to. Do not look him in the eye." He dislikes familiarity." Tess smoothed her skirt. She picked up the heavy, leather-bound wine list. She had been a PhD candidate in linguistics at Columbia University 3 years ago. She spoke 4 languages fluently and could read 3 others. She had been the department's shining star destined for the UN or high-level diplomacy. Then her mother got sick. Pancreatic cancer doesn't care about your PhD. It doesn't care about your potential. It eats money faster than it eats cells. The insurance had caps. The experimental treatments were cash only. Tess had dropped out, sold everything, and taken the highest-paying service job in the city to pay for chemo. Her mother had died 6 months ago, leaving Tess with a broken heart and a mountain of debt that kept her shackled to Lulu. She took a deep breath, pushed open the heavy mahogany doors of the private VIP room, and walked into the lion's den. The VIP room was a cloud of cigar smoke, despite the strict no-smoking laws of New York City. When you are worth $50 billion, fines are just fees you pay to do whatever you want. There were 6 men at the table. 5 of them were clearly sycophants business associates in expensive Italian suits who laughed too loudly and drank too quickly. In the center sat Karim Olsed. He was undeniably handsome, with sharp predatory features and eyes as black as oil. He wore a tuxedo, his tie undone, looking like a bored emperor. He didn't look up when Tess entered. "Water," he said. He didn't ask, he commanded. He was staring at his phone, scrolling through what looked like a contract. Sparkling or still, so Tess asked softly. Karim stopped scrolling. The silence in the room was instant. The other men stopped laughing. Karim slowly lifted his head. He looked at Tess not with anger, but with the look one gives a malfunctioning toaster. "Did it just speak, Karim?" asked the man to his right, a heavy-set American banker named Brad. Brad laughed nervously. "I think she asked a preference, Your Highness." Karim looked back at his phone. "Still, and bring the 45 Roman Conte. If you drop it, I will garnish your wages for the next 3 lifetimes." Tess felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she bowed her head. "Yes, sir." She retreated to the service bar. Her hands were shaking. 3 lifetimes. He wasn't wrong. A bottle of the 1945 Roman Conti cost more than her mother's entire course of treatment. As she prepared the wine service, she watched them from the shadows. They were loud. They were obnoxious. But then the language shifted. Karim, bored with the English conversation about stock prices, turned to the man on his left, a younger associate named Victor, who seemed to be his personal assistant. Karim switched to Arabic. Now, Tess had studied Arabic for 6 years. She had spent a summer in Jordan on a fellowship. She didn't just know tourist Arabic. She knew the poetic nuances of classical Arabic and the sharp street-level slang of the Levant. "Look at this place, Victor Dor Huldai," Karim said in Arabic, his voice smooth and deep. "It smells of desperate ambition. These Americans, they eat raw fish and think they are cultured." Victor chuckled, replying in Arabic. "It is the best restaurant in the city, sir. It is a cafeteria with better lighting." Karim scoffed. Tess returned with the wine. She performed the ritual perfectly. She presented the label. She cut the foil. She wiped the rim. She poured the taste. Karim swirled the wine, took a sip, and waved his hand dismissively. He didn't say good. He just signaled for her to pour. As she moved around the table pouring for the guests, Karim continued his Arabic commentary, assuming the white woman in the apron heard nothing but noise. "Look at her hands," Karim said to Victor, gesturing vaguely at Tess with his wineglass. "Rough red like a farmer who milks goats." Tess froze for a fraction of a second. The bottle hovered over Brad's glass. She forced herself to pour. "Steady," she told herself. "He's a child with a credit card. Ignore him. She probably thinks this wine is grape juice." Karim continued laughing softly. "Do you think she can even read the label? Or does she just look at the shapes of the letters?" Victor looked uncomfortable. "Sir, she is right there." So Karim sneered, his eyes bored into Tess's back as she moved to the next guest. "Does the camel understand when the rider curses it? No, it just walks. She is a camel, Victor. A camel in a polyester skirt." The insult was specific in the dialect he was using. Calling a woman a camel wasn't just calling her ugly. It was calling her a beast of burden, stupid, stubborn, and devoid of soul. It was a dehumanizing slur used by the elite against the peasantry. Tess finished pouring. She placed the bottle in the coaster. She had to walk away. She had to. But Karim wasn't done. He snapped his fingers. "You waitress?" Tess turned. "Yes, sir." "My steak," he said in English, pointing to his plate of Wagyu ribeye. "It is cold. Take it back." Tess looked at the steak. Steam was still rising from it. It had been on the table for less than 2 minutes. "Sir," she said gently, "I can assure you it is quite hot, but I can certainly have the chef." "I said," Karim interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "it is cold. Are you arguing with me? Is your brain too small to comprehend a simple instruction?" He switched back to Arabic, looking at his friends for validation. "See the camel brace. She tries to think. It is painful to watch." The table erupted in laughter. Brad and the other Americans didn't know what was said, but they laughed because the prince laughed. They laughed at her confusion. They laughed at her poverty. Tess stood there holding the silver tray against her chest like a shield. The anger that had been simmering in her gut for 3 years. The anger at the doctors who asked for credit cards before saving lives. The anger at the university that cut her funding. The anger at a world that let men like Kareem exist. While her mother died in pain, began to boil over. She looked at the steak. She looked at Kareem. "I clear's throat will fix it immediately, sir," she said. She took the plate. As she turned to leave, she heard Kareem say one last thing in Arabic. It was the final straw. "Imagine the life of such a creature," he murmured, swirling his wine. "She goes home to a rat hole, eats garbage, and dreams of being us. It is pathetic. God wasted a soul on that body." Tess walked through the swinging doors into the kitchen. The noise of the kitchen hit her, the clatter of pans, the shouting of chefs. She set the plate down on the pass hard enough that the china rattled. "Refire table 1, VIP," she yelled. Henri ran over. What happened? Did he like the wine? Tess looked at Henry. Her hands were no longer shaking. They were fists. He loved it, Henry. He's having a wonderful time. Good. Good. Henry wiped his face. "Keep him happy, Tess. The owner says if tonight goes well, there's a $5,000 bonus for the floor staff." $5,000. That would pay off the last of the funeral costs. It would pay her rent for 3 months. It was freedom. Tess closed her eyes. Swallow it, she told herself. Be the camel. Just carry the load. She took a deep breath, grabbed a fresh napkin, and prepared to go back out. But as she picked up the refried steak 5 minutes later, a plan began to form in the back of her mind. It wasn't a plan of revenge. Not yet. It was a plan of revelation. She walked back into the VIP room. The atmosphere had shifted. They were drunker, now louder. Kareem was standing up holding his wine glass, making a toast. To the merger, he announced in English. To Omnicorp. Tomorrow we buy them, we strip them, and we rebuild them in my image. Hear, hear, the men shouted. Tess placed the fresh steak in front of him. Kareem sat down, ignoring her. He sliced into the meat. He took a bite. Better, he grunted. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. He answered it, putting it on speaker so he could cut his meat switching instantly to Arabic. Father Kareem said, "I am celebrating." A harsh, rasping voice came from the phone. It was the king, or at least the head of the family trust. "You celebrate too early, Kareem." The voice crackled. "The Omnicorp deal is stalled." The room went silent. Kareem froze. What, why the contracts are ready? The audit, the father said they found the discrepancies in the shell companies in Malta. They know about the debt leveraging. If they translate the secondary ledgers, the deal is dead and you will be disowned. Kareem went pale. They can't translate them. The ledgers are in the old dialect. It's coded. No Western auditor can read that. It requires a scholar, not an accountant. They have hired a firm, the father warned. If they find anyone who understands the Al-Sura dialect, we are finished. Fix this, Kareem, or do not come home. The line went dead. Kareem sat there stunned. The arrogance was gone, replaced by pure panic. He looked around the table at the Americans. "Is everything okay?" Prince Brad asked. Fine Kareem snapped in English. "Just family business." He turned to Victor, whispering frantically in Arabic. "We need to hide the ledgers tonight before the morning audit. But the files are corrupted. I need someone to read the physical copies I have in the briefcase and transfer the data to the clean server. But I can't do it alone. There are thousands of pages. I can't read Al-Sura dialect, sir." Victor whispered back, terrified. "It's archaic. Only you know it. I need help." Kareem hissed, slamming his fist on the table. "I need someone who can read this specific useless dialect immediately, or I lose $5 billion. Tess was standing right behind him, refilling his water. She heard every word. She knew Al-Sura. It was the subject of her master's thesis. It was a dying dialect of the Southern tribes, complex, poetic, and incredibly difficult. There were perhaps 50 people in the Western Hemisphere who could read it fluently, and one of them was pouring his water. Tess looked at the back of his neck. She looked at the sweat forming on his collar. He was drowning, and she was the only life raft in the ocean. But he had called her a camel. He had called her soulless. Tess finished pouring. She capped the bottle. "Is there anything else I can get you, sir?" she asked in English, her voice sweet as poison. Kareem waved her away without looking. "Go away. Get out." Tess smiled. A cold, dangerous smile. "Very good, sir." She walked back to the kitchen station. She didn't go to the kitchen. She went to the POSO's computer system. She printed out the check. Then she took a pen from her apron. On the back of the receipt, she didn't write, "Thank you." She wrote a single sentence in perfect calligraphy-style Arabic in the Al-Sura dialect. "The camel carries the gold, but only the wise man knows how to unlock the saddle." She walked back to the table. The men were arguing now. Kareem was shouting into his phone again. Tess placed the leather bill folder directly in front of Kareem. "The check, sir," she said. "I didn't ask for the check." Kareem roared, spinning around to face her. "Are you deaf as well as stupid? I thought you might want to leave early." Tess said, her voice dropping an octave, losing the service lilt and becoming hard, academic and commanding. "To handle your audit problems." Kareem froze. He looked at her, really looked at her. "What did you say?" "Open the folder," Tess said. Kareem stared at her, confused by the sudden shift in her demeanor. He opened the leather folder. He saw the bill. He flipped it over. He saw the Arabic script, the distinctive loops and dots of the Al-Sura dialect. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked up at Tess. The camel was gone. In her place stood a woman who looked 10 feet tall. "You," he whispered. The silence in the VIP room was heavier than the velvet curtains draping the windows. The ambient jazz music seemed to stop. The clinking of silverware ceased. Kareem stared at the receipt. His thumb traced the ink of the Arabic script. The calligraphy was perfect, not the shaky scroll of a student, but the fluid, confident strokes of a master. Alsa, the dialect of the poet-warriors of the 19th century, the dialect of his grandfather's secret ledgers. He looked up at Tess. The woman standing before him was no longer the invisible servant. Her posture had shifted. Her shoulders were back. Her chin lifted. The grey eyes that he had dismissed as dull were now blazing with a terrifying intelligence. "Who wrote this?" Kareem asked, his voice barely a whisper. He spoke in English, but his accent had thickened, stripped of its polished veneer by shock. Tess didn't blink. "The camel," she replied calmly. "The beast of burden with the small brain. The creature you said God wasted a soul on." The colour drained from Kareem's face. Brad, the American banker, looked between them, sensing the sudden tension. "Prince, is there a problem with the bill? Did they overcharge?" Tess turned her gaze to Brad. "The prince isn't worried about the bill, sir. He is worried because he just realized that the furniture has ears." She looked back at Kareem, and then she switched languages. She didn't use the servant's Arabic he expected. She didn't use the street slang. She spoke in modern standard Arabic, but with the specific archaic inflection of the Al-Sura region. It was the linguistic equivalent of walking into a dive bar wearing a royal crown. "You have a dilemma," Prince Al said. She said in fluent Arabic, her pronunciation crisp and flawless. "You have 5 hours before the auditors in London open your files. You have 3,000 pages of ledgers written in a dialect that hasn't been taught in schools for 50 years, and the only person in this hemisphere who can read them is the waitress you just spent 2 hours humiliating." Kareem stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the park floor. "Who are you?" he demanded in Arabic. "You are a spy, a corporate spy sent by Omni Corp. I am a PhD candidate in Semitic linguistics from Columbia." Tess replied, switching back to English so the rest of the table could understand the depth of his error. "My thesis was on the etymological evolution of the Al-Sura dialect in post-Timan trade agreements." I don't just speak it, Kareem. I understand the codes. I understand the double meanings used in the old ledgers. Victor, the assistant, dropped his fork. It clattered loudly onto his plate. She knows, Victor gasped. Sir, she knows the dialect. Kareem looked at his friends. He looked at Tess. He was cornered. A man worth $50 billion was suddenly at the mercy of a woman earning $2.13 an hour plus tips. But the arrogance was hard to kill. He tried to regain control. He laughed a short, sharp bark that sounded forced. So Kareem sneered, adjusting his tuxedo jacket. You speak a little Arabic. Good for you. You want a bigger tip? Is that it? You want me to apologize so you can feel big? Tess smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I don't want your apology. It wouldn't be sincere anyway. You mocked my hands. You mocked my clothes. You mocked my life. She turned to the table. She looked at the man sitting 2 seats down from Kareem, a heavy-set man named George. By the way, Tess said pleasantly to George, when the prince was laughing earlier and you were laughing along with him, he wasn't telling a joke. He was saying that you eat like a starving hyena and that your wife likely stays with you only because she has a shopping addiction that requires your credit limit. George's face went purple. Excuse me? She turned to Brad. And you? He called you a parasite in a suit. He said you have the business acumen of a distracted toddler and that he plans to fire your firm the moment the merger is complete. The room erupted. Is that true, Kareem? Clear's throat. Brad demanded, standing up. Sit down. Kareem shouted, sweat breaking out on his forehead. She is lying. She is twisting words. I never twist words. Tess said, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. I study them. I cherish them, unlike you, who uses them as weapons against people you think are beneath you. She dropped the leather bill folder on the table. I'll leave you to your audit, Prince. Good luck translating the black ledgers of the Southern Trust. I'm sure Google Translate will do a wonderful job with the 19th century metaphoric coding. She turned on her heel and walked toward the door. Wait, Kareem screamed. It was a sound of pure desperation. Tess stopped. She didn't turn around. Her hand hovered over the brass door handle. Victor! Kareem barked. Get everyone out now, sir. Victor stammered. Out! Kareem roared, his eyes fixed on Tess's back. Everyone out. The dinner is over. Go to the bar. Go home. I don't care. The sycophants, insulted and confused, didn't need to be told twice. They grabbed their jackets and scrambled out of the room, casting angry glares at Kareem and bewildered looks at the waitress. The door clicked shut behind the last of them. The Clear's throat room was suddenly very large and very quiet. Just the billionaire and the waitress. Turn around, Kareem said. His voice was no longer shouting. It was tight controlled and trembling. Tess turned slowly. She crossed her arms over her stained apron. Yes, you are really a scholar? He asked, studying her face. I was until life got in the way. And you can read the dialect. Truly, you aren't bluffing. Tess walked back to the table. She picked up the wine bottle, the 1945 Roman Conte. She poured herself a glass, violating every rule of the restaurant. Kareem didn't stop her. She took a sip. The Al Sora dialect uses a tricontinental root system, but unlike standard Arabic, it relies heavily on context-dependent vowels that aren't written. She lectured as if standing in a classroom. Specifically in financial ledgers from your grandfather's region, the word for profit and the word for debt are written identically. The only way to tell them apart is by the honorific used in the preceding sentence. If you mistranslate one verb, you turn an asset into a liability. If you hand those ledgers to a Western auditor, they will think you are bankrupt. They will kill the deal. Kareem collapsed into his chair. He put his head in his hands. She was right. She knew exactly what the problem was. She knew more about his family's coding system than he did. He looked up at her. The contempt was gone, replaced by the cold calculation of a businessman making a deal. How much, he asked. Tess swirled the wine in the crystal glass. It tasted like Berry's earth and history. It tasted like money. "Excuse me," she asked. "How much to fix it?" Kareem pulled a checkbook from his inside pocket. He clicked a gold pen. "You want money? Everyone wants money. You're working here, so you obviously need it. $5,000. Tonight you come to my hotel. You translate the files. You go home." Tess laughed. It was a genuine laugh of disbelief. 5,000, she repeated. "You just spent 12,000 on this bottle of wine which you barely drank. You think my brain is worth less than fermented grapes? 10,000, Kareem counted quickly. That's more than you make in 6 months here. The deal with Omnicorp is worth $4 billion, isn't it?" Tess mused, looking at the ceiling. "I read the Wall Street Journal in the break room. If this deal fails, your stock plummets. Your family loses face. You lose your position as CEO. She leaned over the table, placing her hands on the white tablecloth, leaning into his space. "I am not a waitress right now, Kareem. I am a consultant, and you are in a crisis, supply and demand, basic economics." Kareem's jaw tightened. "You are blackmailing me." "No, blackmail is when I threaten to expose your secrets," Tess said sharply. "I have no interest in your secrets. I am offering a service, a specialized, highly technical service that literally no one else can provide in your time frame." Clear's throat. "If I walk out that door, you lose everything. If I stay, you win." Kareem stared at her. He hated her. He hated that he needed her. He hated that this woman whom he had reduced to a camel was now holding the whip. "Name your price," he hissed. Tess paused. She thought about the medical bills, the debt collectors calling her phone 5 times a day, the eviction notice taped to her apartment door this morning. She thought about the research grant she had lost. $50,000, she said. Kareem began to write. "Fine, done." "Wait," Tess interrupted. "I'm not finished." Kareem stopped writing. "What else, $50,000? Tess continued, "Wired immediately to my bank account before I translate a single word." Plus, she took a breath. "You apologize?" Kareem froze. "I am a prince. I do not apologize to staff." "Then translate the ledgers yourself," Tess said, straightening up and putting down the wineglass. "Good night, Prince." She turned to leave again. She counted the steps in her head. 1, 2, 3, stop. She stopped. "Fine." Kareem slammed the pen down. "I apologize. I was rude. I was arrogant. Is that enough?" Tess turned back. "It was pathetic, but it will do. And one more condition. You are testing my patience." Kareem growled. "If I save this deal," Tess said, her voice steel. "If I pull this off and you get your merger, you will fund my research. You will endow a chair at Columbia University for Semitic linguistics, and you will ensure my mother's medical debts are wiped clean by the hospital foundation your family donates to." Kareem looked at her. Clear's throat. He saw the desperation behind the bravado. He saw the daughter who had lost everything. For the first time, he saw a human being, not a prop. "You drive a hard bargain for a waitress," he murmured. "I learned from the best," she replied dryly. "Are we in agreement?" Kareem stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at his watch. "We have 4 hours and 45 minutes before the London office opens. We need to go now. I have to tell my manager," Tess said. "I will buy the restaurant if I have to." Kareem snapped, his energy returning. "Just move." The kitchen staff of Lulu watched in stunned silence as Tess Harrington, the quiet girl who always took the double shifts, walked out the back exit. But she wasn't carrying a trash bag. She was walking side by side with Prince Kareem Al Saad. Henry, the manager, dropped a tray of espresso cups. "Tess, where are you going? You have tables." Kareem stopped. He turned to Henry. He pulled a wad of cash from his pocket, at least $2,000, and stuffed it into Henry's shirt pocket. "She is taking the rest of the night off," Kareem announced. "Consider this her buyout clause." Tess didn't look back at Henry. She didn't look back at the grease-stained floor or the pile of dirty dishes. She stepped out into the rainy New York night. A sleek black limousine was waiting at the curb. The driver, a massive man with an earpiece, opened the door. Kareem gestured for her to enter. "After you, Miss Harrington." Tess hesitated for a split second. The interior of the car smelled of leather and power. This was a world she had only observed from the outside. Once she got in, there was no going back. She slid into the seat. Kareem followed her, the door thudding shut, sealing them off from the noise of the city. To the Plaza Hotel, Kareem told the driver, and drive fast. As the car pulled away, Tess looked at her hands. They were still red from the hot water and sanitizer of the restaurant. She was still wearing her uniform. "You have a computer?" Tess asked. "The best," Kareem said, opening a hidden compartment to reveal a crystal decanter of whiskey. He poured 2 glasses. He handed one to her. "To the audit," he said, raising his glass. There was no mockery in his eyes now, only fear and a grudging respect. To the Camel, Tess corrected him, clinking her glass against his. She took a sip. The whiskey burned, but it woke her up. She was about to engage in the most high-stakes linguistic puzzle of her life. "Show me the files," she said. Kareem opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of photocopied papers. They were dense handwritten pages covered in the swirling, intricate script of the 19th century Al-Sura dialect. Tess took the first page. She adjusted the reading light. Her eyes scanned the text. "In the name of the beneficent, the merciful. This ledger records the flow of water and gold." She frowned. "What is it?" Kareem asked, anxiously leaning in. "This isn't just a ledger," Tess whispered, her finger tracing a line of text. "Kareem, this is a genealogy. These assets, they aren't tied to the company. They are tied to a bloodline." "What does that mean?" "It means," Tess looked up at him, her heart pounding, "that the money isn't lost, it's hidden. And according to this half of it, doesn't belong to your father. It belongs to someone else." Kareem went pale. Who? Tess looked back at the document. She deciphered the name written in the archaic honorifics. "It belongs," she read slowly, "to the guardian of the salt." "Who is that?" Kareem dropped his glass. The whiskey spilled over the plush carpet. "My uncle," he whispered. "The one who was exiled 30 years ago." The plot had just thickened. Tess wasn't just saving a merger. She was uncovering a royal coup. The presidential suite at the Plaza Hotel was larger than Tess's entire apartment building. It was decorated in gold leaf and cream velvet, but right now it looked like a war room. Clear's throat. It was 3:15 a.m. Tess sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by piles of paper. Her waitress uniform was wrinkled, her apron discarded on a Louis Daffy chair. She had a laptop open, cross-referencing the scanned ledgers with an online database of archaic Semitic root words. Kareem was pacing. He had shed his tuxedo jacket and bow tie. He looked exhausted, his eyes red, but he was watching Tess with an intensity that made the air in the room feel thin. "The London office opens in 2 hours, Kareem said, checking his diamond-encrusted watch for the 100th time. "Do we have enough to clear the audit?" Quiet Tess murmured, not looking up. "I'm working on the verb structure in paragraph 42. She tapped her pen against her lip. This was the knot. The ledgers described a massive transfer of funds, nearly $2 billion that had occurred 30 years ago. In the English summary provided by Kareem's previous accountants, this was listed as startup capital debt, but the Al-Sura dialect told a different story. "Kareem," Tess said, waving him over. "Come, clears throat here." He knelt beside her. The proximity was jarring. For a moment, the billionaire and the waitress were just 2 students solving a problem. "Look at this word." She pointed to a jagged scroll of Arabic. "Istalah." It means to take, Kareem said. "In modern Arabic, yes. But in the Al-Sura dialect of the southern tribes during the 19th century, trade agreements, this verb, formed the 10th form, implies to take what is not yours by force. It implies usurpation." Kareem frowned. So Tess looked him in the eye. "These aren't loans. Your father didn't borrow the money to start the company. He stole it. He seized the assets of the guardian of the salt, your uncle Nasir, and listed them as corporate debt to hide the paper trail." Kareem rocked back on his heels. "That's impossible. Nasir was exiled because he was mentally unstable. He tried to burn down the oil fields. My father saved the family by taking control. According to history written by the victor, Tess said softly. But according to grammar, your father committed embezzlement on a massive scale. If the auditors translate this correctly, they won't just block the merger. They will alert the international banking authorities. Your company is built on stolen money. Kareem stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at Central Park, dark and wet in the rain. If this is true, he whispered, I am finished. The deal collapses, the stock crashes, my family is ruined. He turned back to her, his face a mask of despair. Can you fix it? Tess looked down at the papers. She saw the lies. She saw the corruption. Part of her wanted to let him burn. He was arrogant. He was cruel. He represented everything she hated about the imbalance of the world. But then she looked at him. He wasn't the prince anymore. He was a son realizing his father was a criminal. He was terrified, and frankly, she needed the money. The Al-Sura dialect has a loophole. Tess said, her mind racing. It's a poetic language. It relies on intent. Explain, Kareem demanded. There is a secondary meaning to Tess said, typing furiously into the laptop. In religious texts, it can mean to hold in trust for the righteous return. If we recontextualize the entry, if we add an addendum that frames this money not as a theft, but as a custodial trust held for Uncle Near's heirs, it becomes a liability. Yes, but a legal one. It's not Clear's throat, a crime anymore. It's just complicated accounting. A custodial trust, Kareem repeated. So we admit we have the money, but we say we are holding it for him. Exactly. It satisfies the auditors because the money is accounted for. It saves the merger because it's not fraud. But it means you have to acknowledge your uncle's claim. Tess said, you have to admit legally that $2 billion of your empire belongs to the man your father exiled. Kareem closed his eyes. It was a poison pill. To save the company, he had to betray his father's lie. Do it, Kareem said, his voice hard. Write the translation, structure the addendum, make it look like we planned this all along. Tess nodded. Get me more coffee. For the next 90 minutes, they worked in a fever state. Tess translated, drafted, and reformatted the documents. Kareem worked the phones, waking up his legal team in Zurich to prepare the filing structures. As the sun began to grey the sky over Manhattan, Tess hit the final key. It's done, she said, her voice raspy. The file is ready for upload. Kareem looked at the screen. The Clear's Throat translation was a masterpiece of linguistic diplomacy. It turned a crime into a misunderstanding. It saved his life. He looked at Tess. She was slumped against the sofa. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair messy. You are. Kareem started struggling for the word. You are remarkable. I'm tired. Tess said, and I have a shift at lunch. Kareem laughed. A real warm laugh. You are not going back to Lulu's, Tess. You just saved a $50 billion merger. You are done serving tables. He sat down on the sofa next to her. The distance between them had vanished. He reached out and awkwardly, gently took her hand. His hand was warm. Thank you, he said. Not just for the work, but for showing me. Showing you what? Tess asked, her heart beating a little faster. That I was blind, he said. I looked at you and saw nothing, and you held the keys to my kingdom. For a second, the air was charged. It felt like the start of something, a romance, a partnership. Then Kareem's phone rang. It wasn't the business line, it was the private encrypted line. The ringtone was a specific jarring chime. Kareem froze. He pulled his hand away. He looked at the screen. It's my father, he whispered. Kareem stood up and walked to the far side of the suite. He answered the phone, switching instantly to Arabic. Father, the deal is done. The files are uploaded. Tess couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she could see Kareem's posture change. He stiffened, his shoulders hunched. The relief from moments ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, rigid tension. Yes, Kareem said. I found a translator, a specialist. There was a long silence. Tess watched him. She felt a knot form in her stomach. No, Kareem said, his voice lower. She is nobody a local. She doesn't know the implications. Another silence. Kareem turned and looked at Tess. His eyes were unreadable. They were no longer the warm eyes of the man who had just held her hand. They were the black oil eyes of the billionaire. "I understand," Kareem said finally. "I will handle it. It will be as if she never existed." He hung up the phone. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the floor. Then he buttoned his shirt, walked over to the desk, and picked up his checkbook. Tess stood up slowly. "Kareem, is everything okay?" Kareem didn't look at her. He wrote on the check. He ripped it out with a sharp tearing sound. "Here," he said, extending the piece of paper to her. Tess looked at it. It was a check for $100,000, double what they had agreed upon. "What is this?" she asked. "Payment," Kareem said coldly, "for services rendered." I thought we had a deal about the research grant." Tess said, confused by the sudden shift in temperature. "About the chair at Columbia. Plans have changed." Kareem said, his voice flat. "My father requires a different approach. We cannot have a public connection to this translation. It needs to remain internal." "So you're buying my silence?" Tess asked, her voice trembling with rising anger. "I am paying you a fortune," Kareem snapped. "Take the money, Tess. Go pay your mother's debts. Go to Paris. Go wherever you want. Just go." "And the research?" Tess stepped forward. "The endowment. You gave me your word. My word." Kareem sneered, channeling the arrogance he had worn at the restaurant, like armor was given to a waitress in a moment of desperation. "It is not a binding contract." He walked to the door and opened it. 2 large security guards were waiting in the hallway. "Escort Miss Harrington out," Kareem commanded, "and ensure she does not speak to the press." Tess felt like she had been slapped. The betrayal was physical. It hurt more than the insult at the restaurant, because for a few hours she had thought he was different. She had thought they were partners. She looked at the check in her hand. $100,000. It was life-changing money, but it was dirty. She looked at Kareem. He was refusing to meet her eyes. He was looking at his phone, already moving on to the next deal. "You're a coward," she said quietly. Kareem flinched just barely. "You're not a prince," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "You're just a frightened little boy doing what Daddy tells him. You saved your company, Kareem, but you're still poor. You're the poorest man I've ever met." "Get her out," Kareem yelled at the guards. The guards stepped forward. "Mom, please." Tess didn't let them touch her. "I'm leaving." She walked to the door. She stopped and looked back at him one last time. "Be careful, Prince," she said. "You forgot one thing about the Al-Sura dialect." Kareem looked up. "What, the grammar of the oppressed?" Tess said, "It has a very strong future tense, and it implies consequences." She turned and walked out. The heavy door slammed shut behind her. Inside the suite, Kareem let out a shaky breath. He walked to the whiskey decanter and poured a glass, his hands trembling violently. "I had to," he whispered to the empty room. "I had to. His father had been clear. Get rid of her. If she knows about the theft, she is a liability. Pay her off. Scare her off. Or I will have my own men silence her permanently." Kareem had chosen the option that kept her alive. He had played the villain to save her from the monster. But as he drank the whiskey, he felt a sickness in his gut. He realized he hadn't just saved her. He had made an enemy of the one person who actually understood the language of his life. Outside the Plaza Hotel, the rain had stopped. The morning sun was hitting the wet pavement. Tess stood on Fifth Avenue. She looked at the check for $100,000. She could cash it. She could disappear. It was the safe choice. But Tess Harrington was tired of being safe. She was tired of invisible illnesses and invisible people. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out a USB drive. While Kareem had been on the phone with his lawyers in Zurich, Tess hadn't just been translating. She had made a copy. She had the original untranslated ledgers. She had the proof of the theft. She had the proof that the Alciad Empire was built on a lie. She looked at the check, then at the USB drive. She hailed a taxi. "Where to, lady?" the driver asked. Tess looked at the skyline. "Take me to the offices of the New York Times," she said. But then she hesitated. Going to the press was the nuclear option. It would destroy Kareem. It would destroy everything. Was that who she was? She remembered his face when he talked about his father. The fear. No, she wouldn't go to the press. Not yet. "Change of plans," Tess said. "Take me to Queens." She had a better idea. She wasn't going to destroy Kareem al-Sayad. She was going to do something much more painful. She was going to teach him a lesson. She took out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. It was her old mentor at Columbia, Professor Higgins, the man who knew everyone in the diplomatic corps. Professor Tess said, "It's Tess. I have something. Something that belongs to the guardian of the salt. I need to find an exile named Nasir al-Sayad." The game wasn't over. It was just entering the final round. 2 weeks later, the boardroom of Al-Sad Global in Midtown Manhattan was a fortress of silence. This was the day the Omnicorp merger was being finalized. The long, polished table was surrounded by 30 people lawyers, bankers, the CEO of Omnicorp, and Prince Kareem al-Sayad. Kareem looked impeccable in a navy bespoke suit, but he was thinner than he had been 2 weeks ago. He hadn't slept well since the night at the plaza. He kept expecting the phone to ring. He kept expecting a blackmail demand, but there had been nothing. Just silence from the woman he had paid to disappear. "If everyone is ready," the Omnicorp CEO said, uncapping a fountain pen. "We can proceed with the final signatures. The audit cleared thanks to the clarification regarding the custodial trust." Kareem nodded stiffly. "Yes, it is all in order." He reached for his pen. His hand hovered over the paper. Once he signed this, his father's legacy was secure. The lie was buried forever under layers of corporate legalese. The heavy double doors at the end of the boardroom swung open with a bang that made everyone jump. "I apologize for the interruption." A clear, strong voice rang out. Kareem's head snapped up. It was Tess. But it wasn't the waitress. She wore a sharp, charcoal grey suit. Her hair was pulled back in a severe professional bun. She held a leather portfolio under her arm. She didn't look like she belonged in the kitchen. She looked like she owned the building. "Security!" Kareem shouted, standing up. "Remove this woman." "I wouldn't do that," Tess said calmly, walking toward the head of the table. "Not unless you want to remove the majority shareholder of this company." "What are you talking about?" Kareem hissed. "I am the majority shareholder." "No, Kareem," Tess said, stopping 5 feet from him. Clear his throat. "You aren't. You act as the proxy for the family trust. But according to the document you filed 2 weeks ago, the translation I wrote for you, you acknowledged the existence of the guardian of the salt." She stepped aside. Walking through the doors behind her was an elderly man. He leaned on a cane wearing a simple, inexpensive suit, but his face lined with age and hardship bore an unmistakable resemblance to Kareem. It was Nasir al-Sayed, the exiled uncle, the man who had been erased from history. The room gasped. The older members of the board recognized him instantly. They stood up pale as ghosts. Uncle Nasir Kareem whispered, his voice trembling. Nasir limped to the table. He didn't look at the lawyers. He looked straight at his nephew. "You speak of the guardian of the salt in your ledgers." "Nephew," Nasir said, his voice raspy but commanding. "Do you know what that title means?" Kareem shook his head, mute with shock. "In our tribe," Nasir continued, "salt is life. It is the preservation of what matters. The guardian is not just a banker. He is the head of the house. By admitting the funds belonged to the guardian to pass your audit, you legally reinstated my position as the chairman of this trust." Kareem looked at Tess. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She hadn't just saved the merger. She had set a trap. "You tricked me," Kareem said to her. "I translated exactly what you asked me to," Tess replied coolly. "I used the specific legal terms of the Al-Sura dialect custodianship. You were so desperate to hide your father's theft that you signed away your own power." Tess pulled an envelope from her portfolio. It was the check for $100,000. She slid it across the table toward Kareem. "I don't want your hush money, Kareem," she said. "And I don't want your pity." Nasir placed his hand on the merger contract. He looked at the Omni Corp CEO. "The merger proceeds," Nasir announced. "It is good business, but the leadership changes." He turned to Kareem. "My brother, your father, stole my life. He exiled me to live in poverty in Brooklyn, while he built this empire on my inheritance. But I do not believe in revenge. I believe in correction." Nasir pointed a shaking finger at Kareem. "You will remain CEO Kareem." Kareem blinked. "What you are good at making money," Nasir said. "But you are terrible at being a human being. You will remain CEO, but you answer to me now, and your salary is frozen. You will work for a stipend. The rest of your compensation will go into a foundation. A foundation for what?" Kareem asked, defeated. "For the education of underprivileged students," Nasir said, smiling at Tess. "Specifically, a new department of Semitic linguistics at Columbia University, headed by our new director of cultural strategy." Kareem looked at Tess. "You me?" Tess said. "I'm not a waitress anymore, Kareem. And I'm not just a scholar. I'm the person who keeps you honest." Kareem looked around the room. He looked at the check Tess had returned. He looked at his uncle, the man who should have been king. The arrogance finally broke. The billionaire prince slumped into his chair, not as a ruler, but as a man who had been bested. He looked up at Tess for the first time. There was no filter, no sneer. "You speak the language well," he said softly. "I told you." Tess smiled, and this time it was genuine. The camel carries the gold, but the wise man or woman knows how to guide it. She picked up the merger contract and handed him a pen. "Sign it, Kareem. You," clears throat, "have a lot of work to do." Kareem Al-Sad learned the hard way that power isn't about the suit you wear or the money in your bank account. It's about respect. He thought he could trample on a waitress because she served his food, but he failed to see the brilliance hidden behind the apron. Tess Harrington didn't just teach him a lesson in Arabic grammar. She taught him a lesson in humility. Today, Tess runs one of the most prestigious linguistics departments in the world, funded by the Ailey Trust. Kareem is still a CEO, but he's a different man. One who greets his cleaning staff by name and never ever underestimates the person pouring his water. It's a reminder to all of us. Treat everyone with dignity. You never know who is holding the keys to your future. Wow, what a roller coaster. I hope you enjoyed this story of karma and redemption. If you did, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were Tess? Would you have taken the $100,000 and run? Or would you have stayed to fight for justice? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this, where the underdog takes down the giant, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next.